The Zorvith Imperium stretched across 40% of the known galaxy like a dark shadow that refused to fade. For 800 years, Emperor Kael'thun had ruled from his throne on the capital world of Zorvith Prime, and in all that time, no rebellion had succeeded, no uprising had lasted more than a few months, and no conquered world had ever won its freedom back. The secret to his power circled above his palace every day. Dragons, hundreds of them, their massive wings blotting out the twin suns as they performed their patrol routes with mechanical precision. These were not the proud, intelligent beings they had once been. Heavy metal collars wrapped around each dragon's neck, pulsing with a sickly blue light that never dimmed. The collars dug deep into their minds, crushing their thoughts, erasing their memories, and turning them into nothing more than living weapons that obeyed without question. Syrax remembered fragments of before. She was young when the Emperor's forces came to Drakthor, only 50 years old, barely more than a hatchling by dragon standards. She remembered her mother's roar, the sound of plasma fire cutting through the sky, and then the cold metal snapping around her neck. After that, everything became fog. Orders came and she obeyed. Targets appeared and she destroyed them. Years blended into decades, and decades into centuries of empty service. The Emperor kept his dragons in enormous hangar bays when they were not needed. Syrax stood in her assigned position, held upright by metal restraints that kept her from lying down. Sleep came in brief moments, always standing, always ready. Around her, 300 other dragons stood in identical poses, their eyes dull and unfocused. On this particular day, the Emperor walked through the hangar with his war council. He was tall for his species, with gray skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His 4 arms gestured as he spoke, clearly proud of what he had built. 600 years ago, the dragons thought themselves superior, he said to his generals. They believed their fire and their flight made them untouchable. They were wrong. Technology will always defeat superstition. Science will always conquer magic. One of the generals, a younger officer with ambitious eyes, asked, "My Emperor, have there been any more reports of collar malfunctions?" Kael'thun's expression darkened slightly. 3 cases this year. All were handled. The dragons were terminated and recycled. Their mettle served the Empire better than their rebellion ever could. Syrax heard the words of the fog in her mind, but they meant nothing. The collar made sure of that. Any thought that approached rebellion, any feeling that suggested resistance, was immediately crushed by electric pain that shot through her brain. After centuries of this conditioning, most dragons had stopped trying to think at all. Far across the galaxy, in a sector the Emperor had not yet bothered to conquer, a small human colony ship limped through space. The Perseverance had been traveling for 18 months, carrying 300 families toward a world called New Hope. It was supposed to be a simple journey, one of thousands that humanity had made as they spread slowly to their corner of the stars. Then the navigation system failed. The ship's AI, damaged by a micrometeorite strike, made a calculation error that sent them tumbling off course. By the time the crew realized what had happened, they were falling toward an unknown moon, their engines unable to compensate for the gravitational pull. Maya Chin held tight to her seat as the ship shuddered and screamed around her. She was 12 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her mother's datapad clutched against her chest. Her mother, Chief Engineer Lee Chun, was somewhere in the engine room, desperately trying to give them enough power for a controlled crash instead of total destruction. The ship hit the atmosphere of the moon, and everything became fire and noise. Maya closed her eyes and thought about the last thing her mother had told her. Knowledge is the only thing they can never take from you. Remember that, always. The Perseverance crashed into the surface of Talvos, a small moon on the very edge of Zorvith territory. 90 people survived the impact. Maya was one of them, crawling from the wreckage with burns on her arms, and her mother's datapad still somehow intact in her hands. Above them, sensors in the Imperial network detected the crash. Automatic alerts were sent. Within hours, a Dragon Patrol was dispatched to investigate and eliminate any survivors. Syrax was among them, her collar glowing bright as she received her orders. Destroy the intruders. Leave nothing alive. She spread her wings and flew toward Talvos, unaware that everything was about to change. The Dragon Patrol descended on Talvos like falling stars. 6 massive creatures cut through the atmosphere, their wings folded tight against their bodies as they dropped toward the crash site. Syrax was the smallest of the group, but even she was nearly 40 feet long from nose to tail. As they entered the thicker atmosphere, something went wrong. The air on Talvos was different from most worlds, charged with unusual electromagnetic properties that the Imperial scouts had never bothered to document. Syrax felt a sharp pain in her neck, and suddenly the blue light on her collar began to flicker and spark. For the first time in over a century, a thought formed in her mind that was completely her own. What is happening to me? The other dragons did not notice. They landed near the wreckage of the human ship and began their work with brutal efficiency. Fire bloomed across the crash site. Screams echoed through the twisted metal. Syrax landed apart from the others, shaking her head as if trying to clear water from her ears. The collar continued to spark and hiss, and with each flicker, more of her mind came back to her. She remembered her name. She remembered the sky above Drakthor. She remembered her mother's voice teaching her to fly. A human ran past her, not seeing her in the smoke. Syrax's body moved on instinct, her mouth opening to release fire. But then the collar flickered again, and her own will crash back into place. She closed her mouth. The human escaped into the rocky terrain beyond the crash site. The other dragons finished their attack and flew away, returning to their base on the nearest Imperial station. Syrax waited until they were gone, then followed the human's tracks. She did not know why. The collar was still attached, still sending occasional pulses of control through her mind, but the malfunction had created gaps. In those gaps, curiosity lived. Maya had run until her legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed behind a large rock formation, gasping for air, her face covered in soot and tears. She had seen her friends die. She had watched the dragons burn everything. She did not know if her mother had survived. The datapad was still in her hands. Somehow, impossibly, it had survived everything. She hugged it to her chest and tried not to sob loud enough to be heard. That was when she heard the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, the scrape of claws on stone. Maya looked up and saw Death looking back at her. The dragon was enormous, covered in dark red scales that looked almost black in the fading light. Metal plates had been bolted to her body, turning her into a weapon. The collar around her neck sparked and hissed, its blue light casting strange shadows across the rocks. "Please," Maya whispered, because what else could she say? Syrax stared at the small human child. She should kill her. The collar demanded it, sending pulses of pain through her skull. But in the gaps between those pulses, Syrax saw something that made her hesitate. The child was holding something that glowed with soft light. Images moved across its surface. Syrax had seen technology before, but never in the hands of someone so small, so vulnerable, so clearly intelligent. The dragon sat down, slowly, trying not to be threatening. It was harder than she expected. Everything about her body had been designed to threaten. Maya watched in shock as the dragon settled onto the ground and simply looked at her, not attacking, not moving, just watching. Minutes passed in silence. Then the collar sparked particularly violently, and the dragon's head jerked to the side, a low sound of pain rumbling from her throat. Maya saw the collar clearly now, saw how it dug into the dragon's scales, saw the burned flesh beneath the metal. "That's hurting you," Maya said quietly. Syrax could not respond. Dragons could not speak human languages, though they understood more than most humans realized. But she lowered her head slightly, bringing the collar closer to where Maya sat. Maya stood on shaking legs. Every instinct told her to run, but her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Her mother, who had taught her that every problem could be understood, every system could be analyzed. She stepped closer to the dragon. "I think I can help," Maya said, opening her datapad with trembling fingers. "My mom taught me about electrical systems. This collar, it's a machine, and machines can be fixed or broken." She pulled a small toolkit from her pocket, something her mother had insisted she always carry. The dragon remained perfectly still as Maya approached, studying the collar's construction. She found the access panel, pried it open, and began examining the circuits inside. "This is sophisticated," Maya murmured, more to herself than to the dragon. "But the power regulation is damaged. That is why it is sparking. If I can adjust this circuit here." She made a small modification, just enough to reduce the collar's power output by 15%. It was not much, but when she finished, the dragon's eyes suddenly focused with an intensity that had not been there before. Syrax felt her mind clear further. She looked at the small human child who had just given her a piece of herself back, and for the first time in 100 years, she made a choice that was entirely her own. She curled her body around Maya, sheltering her from the cold night wind, and decided that this child would not die. 3 weeks passed in the cave system where Syrax and Maya hid from the Imperial patrols. The dragon had found this place instinctively, a network of tunnels deep enough to mask their heat signatures from the scanning ships that circled overhead every day. Maya spent her time studying the collar, while Syrax learned to think again. It was not an easy process. Every time the dragon tried to form a complex thought, the collar sent warning pulses through her brain. But Maya's modification had weakened it just enough that Syrax could push through the pain if she tried hard enough. "I do not understand how you do it," Maya said one evening, watching Syrax breathe a small flame to warm their dinner. "My datapad says fire needs fuel and oxygen, but you just make it appear from nothing." Syrax tilted her head. She had never questioned her fire before. It simply was like breathing or flying. She tried to pay attention as she breathed flame again, feeling what happened inside her body. Maya watched carefully, then pulled up her chemistry files. "Wait, when you breathe in, do you feel anything happen in your chest? Like mixing or combining?" The dragon focused. Yes, there was something. 2 separate organs that she had never paid attention to before, each producing something different. When she exhaled and wanted fire, they released their contents together. "It is a chemical reaction," Maya said excitedly, reading from her datapad. "You are producing 2 substances that ignite when they mix with oxygen. That is not magic, Syrax. That is advanced biology. That is science." Over the following days, Maya shared everything her mother's datapad contained. Basic physics, chemistry, biology, the scientific method itself, the idea that everything could be understood through observation and testing. Syrax absorbed it all with desperate hunger. Each new concept was like remembering something she had forgotten, like finding pieces of herself that had been locked away. "Try to think about your flying," Maya suggested during one lesson. "You are too heavy to fly with just those wings. The mathematics do not work. So how do you do it?" Syrax had never considered this either. She simply spread her wings and lifted. But now she paid attention, feeling for what happened when she flew. There was something else, something she did without thinking, a push against the world itself, as if she were making herself lighter or making the air hold her differently. Gravity manipulation, Maya read from a physics file, changing how mass interacts with space-time. "Syrax, you are doing something that human scientists have tried to figure out for centuries, and you just do it naturally." The dragon felt something stirring in her mind. If her fire was chemistry and her flight was physics, then what else could she do if she understood how it worked? She tried breathing fire again, but this time she controlled the mixture ratio from her 2 organs. The flame came out hotter, more focused, like a cutting torch instead of a blast. Maya laughed with delight. "You are learning. You are taking your natural abilities and making them better with science." Syrax tried the gravity manipulation next, focusing on understanding what she was doing instead of just doing it. She felt the field she generated, felt how she could make it stronger or weaker. Suddenly she could hover perfectly still, or move in ways she never had before. But the most important discovery came when Maya was examining the collar's inner workings more closely. "This is strange," she said, looking at the circuit board. "This part here, it is receiving and transmitting. I think the collar is not just controlling you. I think it is also stopping you from talking to other dragons." Syrax felt a jolt of understanding. Yes, there had always been something missing, like shouting into a void where voices should answer back. She focused on that feeling, and then on her new understanding of electromagnetic fields. If she could manipulate gravity, Could she manipulate other forces too? She concentrated, generating a small electromagnetic pulse. The collar sparked violently, and for just a moment, she felt something she had not felt in over a century. Other minds, other dragons, dozens of them, all around Talvos, all crying out in the darkness of their imprisonment. Maya, Syrax thought, wishing desperately that she could speak. I can feel them. The girl saw the change in the dragon's eyes. You felt the other dragons, didn't you? The collars are blocking them, but you found a way through. Maya looked at her datapad, then at Syrax, then at the collar. An idea was forming, dangerous and impossible and absolutely necessary. I think I can make a signal, she said slowly. Something that would disrupt all the collars at once. It would be like what happened to yours, but stronger. But we would need to get close to where the dragons are kept. Very close. Syrax understood immediately. She nodded her massive head and extended one wing, inviting Maya to climb onto her back. Then we should go, the gesture said, before we lose our courage. Above them, an Imperial flagship entered orbit around Talvos. The Emperor had come personally to investigate why one of his dragons had stopped responding to commands. The Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion hung in orbit like a predator waiting to strike. Emperor Kael'thun stood in his command center, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he studied the displays showing Talvos below. 200 dragons were docked in the ship's massive hangar bays, ready to be deployed at his command. The malfunctioning unit has been located, reported his security chief. She is accompanied by a human child. They are moving toward the southern ridge. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. A child? Bring them to me. I want to understand what could possibly corrupt my weapon. Syrax and Maya never stood a chance. 20 dragons descended on them within minutes, their collars glowing bright as they followed their orders perfectly. Syrax tried to fight, using her new understanding to make her fire hotter and her movements faster, but she was one against many. They forced her to ground and locked metal restraints around her legs and wings. Maya clutched her datapad as soldiers dragged them both onto a transport shuttle. Syrax tried to shield the girl with her wing, but the soldiers simply shocked her with electric prods until she stopped moving. The hangar bay of Eternal Dominion was the largest space Maya had ever seen. Rows upon rows of dragons stood in their restraints. 200 pairs of dull, empty eyes staring at nothing. The sight made Maya's heart break. These were not weapons. These were people enslaved and broken. They brought Syrax and Maya to the command throne room. Emperor Kael'thun sat on a seat made from the bones of a dragon who had defied him 600 years ago. He looked down at the small human child and actually laughed. "This is what corrupted my dragon," he said, his voice filled with amusement. "A primitive human child with a broken datapad?" Maya lifted her chin, trying to look braver than she felt. "I did not corrupt her. I freed her. I taught her to understand what she could do. Knowledge is not corruption. Knowledge is a tool," the Emperor replied coldly. "And tools belong to those with the power to use them. Your species will learn this soon enough. Humanity has spread far enough through the galaxy. I think it is time we brought your worlds into the Imperium. Your people will make excellent technicians and servants." He gestured to his guards. "Put the child in a holding cell. Terminate the dragon, and recycle her materials. Let this be a lesson about the price of malfunction." The guards moved forward. Maya's hands were shaking, but she managed to press a sequence of buttons on her datapad. She had programmed it days ago, just in case. A simple program, but one that would broadcast a very specific signal. "I am sorry, Syrax," Maya whispered. "I hope we would have more time." The datapad emitted a high-pitched frequency that human ears could barely detect, but the ship's communication systems picked it up automatically, amplifying it through every speaker and relay throughout the entire vessel. The signal was designed to match the exact frequency of the dragon collars, but inverted, creating destructive interference that disrupted their control pulses. Every collar in the ship began to spark and malfunction at once. 200 dragons gasped as their minds suddenly cleared. Syrax felt the collar's grip on her consciousness vanish completely, and when it came a flood of memories, emotions, and rage that had been suppressed for over a century. Around her, dragons were breaking free from their restraints. Some simply tore the metal apart with strength they had forgotten they possessed. Others melted the locks with precisely controlled fire. The hangar bay erupted into chaos as 200 formerly enslaved beings realized they were free. And oh, the Emperor roared, but his voice was drowned out by a sound the galaxy had not heard in 600 years. The collective roar of free dragons, angry and unbroken. Syrax broke her own restraints and moved to shield Maya from the guards. Another dragon, an ancient male who had been enslaved for 4 centuries, melted the throne room doors shut with blasts of fire so hot it turned metal into liquid. A female dragon used her gravity manipulation to pull weapons from the guards' hands. Having learned this trick from the shared consciousness, she could now feel from Syrax's mind. They understand science now, one of the Emperor's generals whispered in horror, watching the displays. They are coordinating. They are using their abilities with precision. The dragons were not just attacking randomly. They combined their powers with the understanding Maya had taught Syrax, and Syrax had shared through their brief mental connection. 3 dragons created a gravitational well that trapped an entire squadron of soldiers. 5 others combined their fire into a single cutting beam that sliced through the ship's internal bulkheads. Others simply flew through the corridors, freeing more dragons from other sections of the ship. Emperor Kael'thun ran. For the first time in 800 years, he fled from a battle. His personal escape vessel launched from the flagship as dragons tore through the ship deck by deck, freeing their imprisoned kin and destroying the collar control systems. Maya stood in the chaos, protected by Syrax and a dozen other dragons who had recognized her as the one who freed them. She watched through the viewport as the Eternal Dominion began to break apart, not from external attack, but from the revolution happening inside it. "I am sorry," she said to Syrax, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry it took so long. I am sorry you suffered." Syrax lowered her head and gently touched Maya's shoulder with her snout. The gesture said everything words could not. "Thank you. You gave us ourselves back." 6 months had passed since the liberation of the Eternal Dominion. The moon of Talvos had transformed from a barren rock into something no one had expected. A home. Maya stood at the edge of the settlement, watching young dragons practice their flying techniques while human children sat nearby, taking notes on datapads. The sight still made her smile. 2 species that should have been strangers, learning from each other as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. The settlement itself was a mixture of salvaged human technology and dragon ingenuity. Buildings made from the crash site materials stood alongside caves that dragons had carved with precision fire cutting. Solar panels provided power, while dragons who understood electromagnetic theory helped optimize the energy collection. It was crude, but it worked. Syrax landed beside Maya, her scales gleaming in the sunlight. The collar was gone now, carefully removed by human engineers and dragon fire working together. In its place was a small communications device that Syrax wore by choice, allowing her to coordinate with the other free dragons across the sector. More dragons arrived today, Maya said, though Syrax already knew. 17 from the Kepler system. They heard the signal and broke free. The Dragon Liberation Network had spread faster than anyone anticipated. Maya's collar disruption signal had been refined and broadcast across Imperial frequencies. Wherever dragons were enslaved, the signal reached them. Not all escaped successfully, but hundreds had, and more joined the free dragons every week. Syrax made a low rumbling sound and gestured with her wing toward the central building. Maya understood. The council was meeting today. Inside the largest structure, dragons and humans gathered around a circular table designed to accommodate both species. Syrax took her place as a dragon representative, while Maya sat beside Commander Peters, the ranking human officer who had survived the Perseverance crash. An older dragon named Veldar spoke first. His voice transmitted through a translation device the humans had built. "We have located Drakthor. Our homeworld still exists, though the Emperor stripped it of most resources. But the land remains. The oceans remain. It can be home again." Murmurs of hope rippled through the dragon representatives. Many had been born in captivity and had never seen their ancestral world. "The Emperor's forces still control the region," Commander Peters warned. "His fleet is damaged but not destroyed. Any attempt to reclaim Drakthor will be met with resistance. A young dragon named Kyra, barely 70 years old, stood. She had been one of the first to learn scientific principles after her liberation. Then we fight with understanding instead of just strength. The Emperor used technology to enslave us. We will use science to free ourselves permanently. Maya raised her hand. We have been working on something. A school, the Dragon Academy. A place where young dragons can learn their history, their culture, and also physics, chemistry, and engineering. We need to preserve what was almost lost, but also embrace what makes us stronger. Syrax nodded her massive head in agreement. Over the past months, she has spent countless hours with Maya and other human teachers, learning and then teaching other dragons. The experience had shown her something profound. Science did not replace their natural abilities or their cultural heritage. It enhanced both. Understanding the chemistry of their fire made them appreciate the biology that produced it. Learning physics made their flight feel like an art form built on natural law. The human fleet will arrive within the week, Commander Peters added. When they find us, they will offer protection and alliance. Humanity is not strong enough to challenge the Emperor alone, but together we are stronger than either species alone. Veldar finished. This is acceptable. The council continued planning into the evening. They discussed offensive strategies, resource allocation, and educational programs. Dragons who understood gravitational manipulation worked with human physicists to develop new propulsion systems. Dragons who could control molecular structures consulted with chemists on material science. It was collaboration unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Later that night, Maya and Syrax climbed to the highest point on Talvos, looking up at the stars. The dragon's enhanced vision could see things Maya could not, but the girl had learned to trust Syrax's sight. He is still out there, Maya said quietly. Thinking of the Emperor, he will come back. Syrax rumbled in agreement. The Emperor had retreated, but he still controlled vast territories and resources. His remaining enslaved dragons numbered in the thousands. The war was not over. But we are ready now, Maya continued, pulling up star charts on her datapad. Every dragon we free makes us stronger. Every human colony that joins the Alliance gives us more support. And every day we learn more. She pointed to a distant star system. That is where the Emperor is building his new command center. Intelligence reports confirm it. And here are the prison stations where he keeps his oldest dragons, the ones who remember the most about Drakthor. Syrax studied the maps, her enhanced mind calculating distances and strategies. She had learned so much in 6 months, but she knew there was infinitely more to discover. The universe was larger and more complex than she had ever imagined when she was enslaved. A small human child had given her more than freedom. Maya had given her curiosity, understanding, and hope. In return, Syrax had given humanity an ally that could reshape the balance of galactic power. Far across the sector, in a fortress built from the wreckage of conquered worlds, Emperor Kael'thon watched intelligence reports about Talvos. He saw dragons and humans working together. He saw his former weapons teaching younglings about science and independence. He saw his empire's greatest advantage turning into his greatest threat. They think knowledge makes them strong, he said to his remaining generals. They will learn that power comes only through domination. But even as he spoke, another report came in. 3 more dragon garrisons had gone silent. The liberation signal had reached them. On Talvos, Maya looked up at Syrax and smiled. My mother always said knowledge is the only thing no one can take from you. She was right. We gave the dragons knowledge of themselves, and now nothing in the galaxy will ever be the same. Syrax spread her wings wide, silhouetted against the stars, and roared. Not in anger or pain, but in defiance and joy. The sound echoed across Talvos, and in the distance, other free dragons answered. The age of chains was ending. The age of understanding had begun.